So it's mathematically impossible to do 100 minutes in 15. So bear with me, we'll do what we can. We're going to start with a game. On your tables are some red cards and some green cards. We're going to play a game called Believe It or Not. So if you could make sure that everybody has a red card and a green card in your hand. All right, everybody ready? The rules of this game are simple. If I show you something you believe, you're going to hold up the green card, which says, believe it. If I show you something you do not believe, you're going to hold up the red card, which says, or not. Are you ready? Here we go. It's Chris Hadfield in space. Do you believe it? Okay. Okay, good. We get how this game plays. It's George Clooney in space. Believe it? Okay, hopefully we're all on the same page. The next one, they start to get a little harder. Do you believe it or not? The quote says, sitting in an 8-meter kayak and watching a 4-meter great white approach is a fairly tense experience. Do you believe it or not? Is the image real? Do you believe it or not? There's an excerpt from this article. It says, diamond rain can be the most common precipitation in the solar system. Does it rain diamonds on other planets? Do you believe it or not? Can you just look around? Here we go. Here's Anderson Cooper on CNN. Do we believe him when he tells us something?
He's got gorgeous eyes.
Okay. CNN, fairly reliable news source, depending.
Put up Fox.
Okay.
Yeah, put Fox up.
Do you believe it or not? Here's a factoid. Do you believe it or not? The total mass of all the ants on the earth is equal to the mass of all the people on earth.
There's so many of them, I'm sorry.
Here's another article. Do you believe it or not? It says scientists have cloned puppies that glow in the dark. Here's an excerpt. It says that the team took skin cells from a beagle, inserted fluorescent genes into them, and put them into the eggs before implanting them into the womb of a surrogate mother of a local mixed breed. Do you believe it or not?
What's the source?
Good question. And that brings me to my next slide, which is, would you believe something if you got it from one of these different sources? Would you believe something if you found it on Google or Twitter or YouTube or Wikipedia or Facebook? Sources play an important part in our thinking about things.
Not necessarily.
Okay, thanks. You can put the little cards down. What I wanted to illustrate is that thinking about what we know is more difficult than just a yes or no answer. I found this quote. It's attributed to Mark Twain, although the actual source of it goes back way further. And I thought this is great. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. This is all around critical literacy. And this came around when I started talking with my students at the beginning of the year about, as literacy teachers, we make the list of all the different books that students like to read, what are fiction, what are nonfiction. And then I discovered that there's this whole category in the middle that fall neither into fiction or nonfiction. They contain truths, but some truths. They contain mistruths. How do kids start to differentiate between those two? The lines between fiction and nonfiction are not clear. We need to teach kids to be critically literate, thinking about what's real, what do they know is real, what's not true, what can you believe, and what should you not. One of those things is source, so thank you for mentioning different sources. We need to teach kids to think about bias. Who's telling the story? We want them to think about perspective. Where's the story coming from? We want them to learn how to cross-reference their information. How do you take something that you find and double-check it with other sources? Look for accuracy, things that are misrepresented. And look for things that are a whole or a partial truth. So that's all part of being critically literate. Where does that fit in literacy? So is critical literacy something that you just teach? You teach your critical literacy unit, and we're done? We're moving on to our media studies next? So in 100 minutes, there's a framework for balanced literacy. And it's something that you can weave in through all elements of literacy as you're teaching. So can you teach kids about being critically literate while you're giving them direct instruction in reading? Can you teach about critical literacy through guided reading, through the independent reading, through the tasks that students are working on as response to reading? Is it something that you can work on in their writing time? So being critically literate is a lens. It's something to work into ongoing literacy. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. I'm teaching grade 6 this year, which is a change. Larry and I worked with my grade 3s last year, which was a hoot, because they are eager to do anything you ask them to do anytime. This year I teach grade 6s. They have opinions, and they are not shy to tell me. They told me my music sucks, but I'm okay. I'm a big girl, I can handle that. So I'm starting my literacy routines at the beginning of the year, and I said to my kids, okay, today we're gonna start guided reading. They audibly groaned. It was like the air had been sucked out of my classroom. So I said, why do you guys hate it? Like, what are you hating on guiding reading? They're like, Miss, it's so boring. We always do the same thing. I don't like reading with other people. I don't get to choose the books that I read. So I shook it up a little bit. So I listened to what they were saying, and it gave me some feedback to think about my classroom. We were reading a text, grade 6, we're learning about space, reading a text about Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, and one of the quotes under a picture had a quote that said something to the effect of, the footprints on the moon will remain there for 1,000,000 years because there's no wind to blow it off. That's when we started to think a little bit critically about it. And at the table, we pulled up the picture of the flag. Now, I am not the first person to invent the moon conspiracy theory, but my children at that moment thought I was absolutely brilliant. So how can we figure out if the flag is actually moving? They said, well, let's see if there's a video. Let's see if there's a video online that would show, and you can see if the moon is blowing because there would be wind in space. So bear with me, I didn't want to show you the whole video. I just grabbed a snap of it that I want to share with you. So watch a video that my kids found. And at that moment, I just actually handed them my phone, which is always in my pocket. And I said, well, let's see what we can find. So here's a video, if you can see it. Here's Neil Armstrong hopping on the moon. Okay, that's the part. That's the part that I didn't notice. We were looking for the flag, but that's the part my kids noticed. Did you notice the camera angle? Did you notice that the camera panned as the rocket took off the moon? My kids know a little bit about media technology. I mean, Miss Donohue, who was on the moon when the rocket took off? I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. But let's find out. So we started asking more questions. We grabbed some iPads. What do you guys want to know? As we're reading this information on space, what questions do you have? Go find out. We watched a trailer for Gravity. We talked about what is real in that we can see, that we know about space, and what is Hollywood. We watched the Challenger disaster. We looked up, oh my gosh, this is something that I would never have learned if my kids had not asked. One of my kids said, is it possible for a space shuttle to sit in lava? Well, I don't know. How hot is lava and how hot is the shield? We discovered that the heat shield on a space shuttle can withstand temperatures up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, how hot is lava? 1,200 degrees. Do you know you can sit a space shuttle in a flow of lava and nothing would happen? Isn't that amazing? We watched the Atlantis dock with the International Space Station. It has to do a complete backflip in order to dock. Isn't that amazing? We talked about the Cold War and its position in the space race. I even know what happens when an astronaut farts in space. Haven't you wondered? Now we know. My kids, who groaned about guided reading, a few weeks later, I was teaching a guided reading, and kids were standing on chairs on the other side of the room because they wanted to see what was going on at that table. all of a sudden it became the hot spot of learning in our classroom. They were engaged, they were excited, because they wanted to know what the other kids were seeing, getting to learn about, that they didn't have a chance to learn about. So we talked a little about critical literacy. It's a little bit of a lens into inquiry. How can you start to weave inquiry into a classroom? And I've come to terms with thinking about inquiry as it's really just being critically literate about information acquisition. It's everything we know about critical literacy, except it's how we acquire information. What does that look like in a classroom? Do we teach the inquiry unit and shut the book and walk on? Or is it something that we can weave into different elements of literacy instruction? Final thing we're going to look at this morning is authenticity. And I am a big believer in authentic tasks. I want the work that my kids are doing to be real and meaningful. This is one of my students' blogs. We took part in a project this year called the Global Read Aloud. Anybody hear of that? Okay, if you have not heard of it, look out for it next year. It's all over, it's easy to find. The Global Read Aloud is, well, this year, 9,000 classrooms across the world are all taking part in reading one of 3 novels to their students. And there is a scope and sequence, so you kind of stay on the same page. But the amazing power of the Global Read Aloud is there's a document where teachers can connect with other teachers around the world. So my students are posting their thoughts on our blog, but they have an authentic audience. They are sharing their shared understandings with kids around the world about a common experience. So my kids are posting, and they're getting responses from other people. They have an authentic audience for their work. I have a classroom Twitter handle, so I tweet my learning. This was a wonderful moment for me. One of my parents started blogging with one of our students, responding back in, joining the conversation. How amazing is that? What does authenticity look like? I'm not an expert in the classroom. I don't know. Ask me again, I'll tell you, I don't know, but let's find out together. Let's ask the people who do. Sharon Drapier is the author of the book that we're reading for Global Read Aloud. It's an amazing, powerful book called Out of My Mind. If you haven't read it, please pick it up. It's about a little girl who is absolutely brilliant, except she has no use of her body is not working properly. She can't move, she can't speak. And it's about her battle to find her voice and be able to share what she knows. And Sharon is obviously making a very important statement about using the word, the R word. I struggle to say it, but she uses the word retarded in the book. And this became a really important conversation for my student. And it's obviously a message against that word. But my kids wanted to know, why did you use that word? I don't know. Let's ask her. She's on Twitter. So we tweeted her. Sharon, why did you use the R word? Let's go to authentic sources. We tweeted NASA. We tweeted Commander Hatfield. We tweeted the Canadian Space Agency, and they responded. How awesome is that? They actually favorited one of my tweets, one of my students' tweets, and resent it. Isn't that amazing? Talking to real people about real issues, that's what authenticity is. Talk about reading responses. I want kids to respond to the things that they are reading. Does that mean that they're writing me a letter and I'm writing back? It could be. This is a group of my students doing a reading response. They had questions coming out of guided reading. Go find out. Go and find out the stuff that matters to you, and then come back and share. So they're responding to their reading. They're asking questions that are important. They're researching. They're thinking critically about it. They're inquiring, and they're coming back to share. Finally, October the 10th was International Day of the Girl. I don't know if you know. And October was Mental Health Awareness Month. So in our classroom, we did some work around mental health and International Day of the Girl. And I posted some information on my website for my students to access and read and view and think about. And this is how one of my students put it, a group of my students shared their understandings around this. And I'll just share their video. Example of authentic work coming out of kids' classrooms. Where does it fit in balanced literacy? Is that something that you do and then you move on to the next thing? Or is it something that you think about as you are teaching kids about reading, writing, listening, speaking, media? My handout didn't fit on a page, so I built you a website. If you go to literacypotluck.weebly.com, there are 5 different tabs with resources, links, professional information for teachers, links for students, videos you might want to share, jumping off points with images and quotes, videos, facts, random articles that you can use to do a believe it or not with your students. Examples of how you can think about authentic tasks in your classroom. Take a few moments, go through it, see what you can find that's useful. It is on the bottom of my handout. So the URL is literacypotluck.weebly.com. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can always find me on my blog, or you can tweet me at Lisa_Donohue. Thanks.